analyzing Arizona's one and only U.S. Senate debate.
I think that each side walks away thinking that they won the debate.
Plus, fact-checking the candidates' claims.
Both candidates said things that stuck to their narratives.
And what officials are doing to ensure your vote counts.
What's going on in social media, that's like, trying to grab water.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us. Early voting is officially underway in Arizona. The same week ballots began arriving in the mail, candidates in the high-profile race for U.S. Senate made their biggest pitch to undecided voters at their first and only debate. We will bring you analysis on their performance, but first, this recap. In downtown Phoenix, in the studios of Arizona PBS, a plexiglass barrier wasn't the only thing separating Republican Senator Martha McSally and Democrat Mark Kelly. The two put their differences on display Tuesday night on a variety of issues facing the nation, starting with the president's handling of the pandemic.
Mark, do you agree with the president's decision to ban travel from China?
Yes, but Senator, you would understand this as a pilot. You guys did step one of the emergency procedure, and then you didn't do anything else.
They clashed over when to confirm the next Supreme Court justice.
Let's be clear. The Constitution says that the president gets to nominate and the Senate gets to confirm. And all 19 times in history, when the party has been the same, they have moved forward with that.
Kelly, meanwhile, criticized McSally's record on health care.
And Senator McSally has worked incredibly hard over the last 5 years to eliminate or undermine protections for pre-existing conditions.
The former fighter pilot also went on the attack, accusing Kelly of being too soft on China and coining him a new nickname.
It's just another example of counterfeit Kelly.
She ended up on the defense when pressed about her support for the president, or if she did enough to stand up for the late John McCain, whose seat she was appointed to fill.
I've publicly and privately repeatedly talked to President Trump and asked him to stop attacking John McCain. Quite frankly, it pisses me off when he does it.
Later in the debate, the candidates offered contrasting views on border security, climate change, and police reform.
When police officers are found that there was serious wrongdoing, there should be an accountability aspect to that.
He said he would support allowing criminals to sue police officers simply for doing their job.
While McSally characterized Kelly as too far left, the retired astronaut tried to cast himself more toward the center.
Partisan politics has made this crisis worse, and partisan politics and partisan politicians are not going to get us out of it.
What's certain are the polls that have him ahead of the incumbent who used her closing remarks to challenge Kelly to another debate.
Let's do 3 more of these around Arizona, because Arizonans really deserve to have this conversation candidate to candidate.
But the clock is already ticking with early voters who will make their choice ahead of November 3rd about who should represent Arizona during an unprecedented moment in our country's history. I was among the moderators at the Senate debate this week, along with KJZZ's Steve Goldstein and Yvonne Winget Sanchez from the Arizona Republic. My thanks to both of you for being here. Let's get right to it. We've had some time to reflect. Steve, what do you say the headline is now?
Well, I think the headline has a lot to do with 2 things. One is I would go with Yvonne's line of questioning about pre-existing conditions, because that has been such the flavor of the month as far as ads going. Can we trust Martha McSally? Can we trust her to protect us when it comes to healthcare? And number 2 was Senator McSally's continued use of counterfeit Kelly. When we talked last night after the debate, we talked about how it seemed a little bit Trumpian, that maybe it was a little bit out of character for her, trying something different there. And the joke is, how many times did she say it? And at what point, even if it's effective for a little bit, at what point does it diminishing returns? And it seemed like we got there pretty quickly.
Steve, are we going to hear counterfeit Kelly here in the next 3 weeks as we inch closer toward November 3rd?
I think it has to be, Lorraine, only the base on that one, because I think the impression we got from independents, and obviously we're going to some extent by social media, emails we've all received, but it sure seemed like unless you were definitely in the McSally camp, that got old very fast. And it also seemed, frankly, disrespectful in a debate that I would think all 3 of us were somewhat encouraged. At least there was some discussion of issues. That's the one part where it seemed like it just sort of went off track. I don't think that gained a whole lot of traction. Certainly not. I don't think we'll be seeing that in an ad. Let's put it that way.
How is this one going to be remembered? Because many of us are still talking about 2018 when we saw Martha McSally with Kirsten Sinema. I mean, where will this one go down in the history books?
Look, I think both sides came to do exactly what they wanted to do. Martha McSally was extremely aggressive out the gate, but not so aggressive as she was in 2018 that overshadowed, her more substantive policy issues. Mark Kelly wanted to go in, come out, not go viral, slow and steady, be consistent on the issues, be disciplined on the issues, and not give independents and moderate Republicans whose support he needs to pick up a reason to vote against him. I don't know, as Steve said, that this did much to persuade any sort of independent, undecided voters. But I think both feel very good about their performances last night. I think that each side walks away thinking that they won the debate.
Ted Simons, of course, pressed Senator McSally so many times about her support for President Trump. And as you mentioned, 2018, that was one of the things we all observed was how closely aligned does she want to be with the president? If she had run in 2016, maybe it would have been good for her. But as we're getting further and further from the president's electoral win in 2016, this is a real tough one. And she seemed to really try to thread the needle as much as possible with support of his policies without support of the man. So that really stood out to me.
Did this debate, I mean, the polls will come out. There's already been one, but did this tighten the race at all?
There are so few undecided folks out there. And as we know about independents, yes, there are so many party not designated in Arizona, no question. But in many cases, these are folks who are unhappy with the Democrats or unhappy with the Republicans. And maybe because they want the Democratic Party to be more left or the Republican Party to be more right, there's a mishmash of that. If, let's say, if we're being generous, 5 to 7%, maybe people are really undecided. I think Yvonne made a great point in that both candidates went in and did what they were tasked with doing. Whether voters think they did it well or not is the question, but it seemed that they followed their strategy.
Expect to see clips from the debate night rolled out in a way that really tries to connect with independent voters, pretty nonpartisan people who want their kids to go back to school, people who want to make sure that their parents and their children are healthy, people who want to keep their jobs. How do those people react to that sort of messaging? And, we don't live in a city that has seen a lot of protests in the streets right now over racial and social injustice. We don't see the same sort of activities that are roiling other cities. And so I just am not sure how effective that sort of play is going to be when you're talking about reaching these crucial voters in the suburbs of Metro Phoenix that are just really concerned about the kitchen table issues.
All right, because we were there and only a few select people will know this, but immediately after the debate, when the candidates left the stage, there was a lot of hooting and hollering. Both sides think they won this, and we're not going to ask who you think won, but where does this take their campaigns here in the next few weeks? Yvonne?
So if I had to say who won, I really would say that the audience won. I say voters won. I think that that was a substantive debate. I thought that for 90 minutes, the audience really got to see these guys interact on a level that they had never seen before. We learned some new things about each of them. And so I think just as a journalist and as someone who cares about the process and the institutions of media organizations like ours and our role in this process, I think that we did a very big service to voters. And I hope that if they didn't get a chance to watch, that they will get to. I don't think we can say beyond that who won the debate in terms of the candidates, but I do think that the fundamentals of this race remain the same.
Now, we all wanted more debates. At the very end, Martha McSally used her closing statement to put Mark Kelly on the spot, and he dodged it. Will we see another one? I mean, is there some false hope that we could have here in the next few weeks?
Don't count on it. I mean, if they wanted more debates, they would have agreed to more debates. And Mark Kelly's campaign has not agreed to more debates. And he is running from the same playbook that Kirsten Sinema ran from in 2018. She agreed to debate Martha McSally one time. She then showed up in person, pre-COVID, obviously, to do a candidate forum on Spanish language TV. And that is the exact same strategy that we are seeing Mark implement this year.
All right, real quick, if we have time for it, we have two very accomplished candidates. I mean, they're combat veterans. One of them's been to space. The other one is the first woman to fly in combat. I mean, how closely can the average Arizonan connect to these two?
Lorraine, this is a fascinating dynamic to me because it also it begs that question of what's the old adage about who would you want to have a beer with? And it's funny because there's that dynamic of, especially when it comes to the Senate, and I would even think the president, that people want to have someone they can relate to. And Yvonne made great points about these are two obviously members of the community in Southern Arizona. But do we also want someone who is better than we are, to put it in sort of a strange sense? Like, these are people who are making huge decisions for the country, and we hope they're making them thoughtfully and putting everything they have into them. So that's where the sort of that, if we're looking at the weighing the scales, yes, we want people we think are great human beings and are just like us, but we also want them to be a little bit better. So that's where that relation question for me comes in. Like, the expectations are, yeah, you're just like me, but gosh, you were an astronaut or you were a fighter pilot, and that was amazing. You're the first female to do that. So I'm trying to weigh the scales on this one. I think they're both important, but we also sort of want to have people who can achieve something maybe we can't as individuals.
Right. Okay, and it takes a special person and a wealthy and connected person to run for the U.S. Senate. I mean, that's been obvious.
Yeah, so you're not running anytime soon then, I guess.
All right, we'll leave you there waiting and wondering about that. My thanks to both of you in moderating the debate and, of course, for this analysis. Steve Goldstein from KJZZ Radio in Phoenix and Yvonne Winget Sanchez from the Arizona Republic. My thanks to you for your work as well.
Thanks so much.
Nice to see you, Lorraine. Bye.
Throughout the debate, the candidates fielded dozens of questions and took jabs at one another. My colleague Christopher Conover looked into some of the claims to sort out what's fact, fiction, or needs more context. Christopher?
For 90 minutes on Tuesday night, Mark Kelly and Martha McSally faced off in their only debate. But was everything they said truthful? Let's start with health care.
Senator McSally, we'll go for 45 seconds for a rebuttal. Did you vote to take away funding for pre-existing conditions?
Of course I didn't, and I hope we have more time to talk about this. I will always protect people with pre-existing conditions, and Democrats and Republicans agree about that.
So who's correct? In July, PolitiFact, which is run by the Poynter Institute, looked at the claim. It found that while in the U.S. House, McSally did vote for the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which is the only law on the books protecting people with pre-existing conditions. McSally said she's voted for legislation that would preserve that protection. A 2017 bill that she voted for, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, could cause people with pre-existing conditions to pay higher insurance premiums. Let's move on to another topic from the debate and your TV ads.
He later on retired and then recruited Tencent, a company close to the Chinese government, to invest in a company that he co-founded.
Worldview is a near-space company that Kelly helped found but left when he started his campaign. It does have investments from Tencent, the Chinese company. Kelly and the company have never denied that fact. But a number of other venture capital companies have also invested. It should be noted that the Arizona Mirror reports that McSally owned mutual funds that included Tencent. Now let's talk about Senate policy.
If you are in the Senate, would you support a filibuster to delay the nomination?
Well, this whole thing indicates how broken Washington is. The discussion of the filibuster.
Who do you need to hear from to form an opinion on the filibuster question?
I'll need to hear an opinion from Arizonans. And when I make that decision, I will let Arizonans know. This is something that might not even come up for discussion. And if it does, I'll spend some time thinking about it. And
to be clear, Kelly did not say whether or not he supports ending the filibuster, and that's where the criticism lies. Some people believe that while he says he wants to study the issue, he should have already done so and should have an answer and not wait to see what happens with the election. It's important because if the filibuster is removed from the rules, the majority party in the Senate can do whatever it wants. The filibuster is a way for one senator, often in the minority party, to slow the process down because it takes 60 votes to break it, which means more than half the Senate must agree to end a filibuster on an issue. Older Senate rules required a senator to continue talking during a filibuster. That rule has now changed. The filibuster is a Senate rule. It's not in the Constitution. Finally, we turn to gun control, specifically background checks and red flag laws.
So again, last year you said you were open to considering red flag gun laws. Is that still the case?
You're misstating the conversations we were having with the White House. We need to make sure that if somebody has been adjudicated to be mentally ill by a judge, that they're in the NICS system. That's what the law is right now. And many states don't put that information in the NICS system, so people end up passing a background check anyway.
With 4 years in the House and nearly 2 years in the Senate, McSally has had her chance to weigh in on background checks and red flag laws. In August of 2019, McSally told the Arizona Republic she was, quote, open to solutions that prevent gun violence. In 2015, she backed legislation that tied gun registration and mental health. The bipartisan bill had the backing of the NRA and the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It reauthorized the federal background check for gun purchases and required states upload data about mental health records to that system. When Governor Doug Ducey proposed a red flag law, McSally said the federal government could incentivize state-level proposals.
All right, Christopher, thanks. And those were just a few of the claims that you looked into. Overall, though, what's your take on how honest the candidates were with viewers?
With McSally, we have an advantage. She has a record from her time in the House and her time in the Senate. Obviously, for Kelly, we don't have that advantage. But I would say overall, both candidates said things that stuck to their narratives.
All right, Christopher Conover, thanks for your insight. We look forward here to the next few weeks ahead of us. After unpacking what the candidates had to say, now we want to take a closer look at how they said it and whether their debate styles also sent a message to voters. For that, we turn to an expert in political communication, University of Arizona professor Kate Kensky. This is the first time we saw Mark Kelly debate publicly. How would you rate his performance?
He was unexpectedly smooth. It seemed as though he was very comfortable in front of the camera. He didn't have some of the uptight characteristics that sometimes candidates have when they're put in that kind of forum for the first time. And he got across what he wanted to get across for each question that he was asked.
If we think back to 2018 when we saw Senator McSally on the stage with Kirsten Sinema, would you say there's been some transformation or is it much of the same?
I think that thematically, she is carrying the party line much as she did before. I do think that in terms of the tone, the tone was much more relaxed than I think it had been in previous debates. She did get her jabs in. We heard her use the phrase "counterfeit Kelly" several times throughout the debate.
Counterfeit Kelly. He criticized the PPP loan.
So the name calling was there, but in terms of as an overall event, it was much more smooth and clear.
What's the value in the name calling? Because we've heard this on the national stage with the president referring to his opponent, Joe Biden.
I think that the president has set the tone in terms of the civility of discourse, and has changed what the norms are around public debate. In previous eras, it was unacceptable to call opponents names on stage, and that was considered a great faux pas if someone engaged in that type of rhetoric.
Did you see any common strategies between the two? I mean, they differed on so many levels, but anything that they shared in their communication styles?
Really, I thought the cadence, sometimes when people become quite emotional or quite anxious, you see the rapidity of their speech speed up. And so we didn't really see that. What I saw were two candidates who didn't get overly emotional, who certainly had messages they wanted to communicate, and they did so quite clearly. I think that if we were to look at their cadence, we would see again that even tone. And if we were to look at the number of times that they made mistakes, very few and far between. I mean, overall, I think that when you take a look at this debate, it is a really a remarkably polished debate for one that takes place at the state level.
How important is it to stay on time? I mean, we had the time cues of 90 seconds for a response and then 45 seconds for a rebuttal. Sometimes the moderators are viewed as unfair because you have to cut off somebody, but there are rules to debate, so it's important to follow them.
As someone who debated in high school, I'm all for the rules when it comes to debate. The rules are negotiated usually ahead of time by the campaigns, and in order to keep that sense of fairness, it is important to stay within the bounds of the debate. Now, that does mean that it is more structured and it isn't quite as organic as a conversation. We have give and take, and we might overlap each other here and in there. But I think that after seeing the presidential debate last week, perhaps the candidates were particularly sensitive to wanting to respect those norms that say there are rules. We have agreed upon these rules for this type of engagement. Let's stick within this system.
Finally, Professor, I know that we will have debates here coming up in the next few weeks on the national or local platform, but you look at them through a very different lens than the average voter. So, what sorts of things would you like to offer people of what they could consider when they're watching these very public platforms?
One thing that I think that people should keep in mind is, are the candidates giving you part of their stump speech, or are they answering the question? Because those things don't always align. You can often tell when a candidate is just giving you something rehearsed. One of the beauties and importance of debate is that it really tests those candidates for their moments of spontaneity and authenticity, because we don't just elect someone to get speeches. We need to see how they think, as things are progressing, things that they might not anticipate. And so I would recommend thinking about what the moderators have asked and the extent to which the candidates have truly answered the questions.
Okay, Professor Kate Kansky from the U of A Department of Communication and the School of Government and Public Policy. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
As we've mentioned, early voting began this week. With more people expected to mail their ballots during the pandemic, the process faces heightened scrutiny. At the start of 2020, election officials in Pima County took steps to inform voters about how it verifies mail ballots. We're revisiting that story and exploring the types of crimes the FBI says pose a threat to the integrity of this election. Here's Tony Paniagua.
Your vote is your voice, and officials are taking measures to have it heard and recorded during the election.
When the people, which we are the people, lead, the leaders will follow, because they only get into these positions by somebody showing up on election day and voting for them.
FN Rodriguez has been running the Pima County Recorder's Office since 1993. Back in January, her office gave the media an inside look at how it verifies mail ballots.
We put the ballots in the treasurer's vault.
And how it planned to dispel information about the process. Many things have changed in our society since she started her job in the 1990s, and not for the better when it comes to misleading voters.
So much misinformation is put out there on Twitter and Facebook that it puts doubt on the public, and we don't want doubt with the public. We want the public to be voting. This is democracy, and this is how it works.
If you have questions or doubts, Rodriguez says it's always best to contact her office directly or another trusted official source, such as the Arizona Secretary of State's office. At her facility, staff have been trained to look for problems or inconsistencies, such as signatures that don't appear to match those on record.
What we do is we have a process. We do have a forensic teacher that comes in here and teaches, a professional here in the state, and the recorders do this throughout the state. We're not experts, okay, but they tell us and they teach us what to look for if somebody's trying to mimic. You know, it's amazing on the things, because people either have a stroke up or a stroke down. Did they lift the pen? Because usually your pen flows.
The FBI is also standing by.
Trusting that our elections are conducted freely, fairly, and with integrity are critical for our republic to function.
In 2006, the agency established the Election Crime Coordinator Program to investigate election crimes, which are divided into 3 categories. They are voter ballot fraud.
A voter who intentionally gives false information when registering to vote, or is an ineligible person votes in a federal election.
Civil rights violations.
Voter suppression is considered a civil rights violation where a person takes steps to either intimidate a voter or interfere with the voter's right to vote.
And campaign finance offenses.
This one right here is extremely complicated. Most federal laws regarding campaign finance are found in our Federal Election Campaign Act.
But as mentioned by the Pima County Recorder's Office, some of the challenges are more subtle.
Here are some recent trends that the FBI has been seeing nationally. The use of social media, email, text, and other digital media to attempt to interfere with people's rights to vote by posting inaccurate information about Election Day, giving the wrong day, wrong polling locations, or telling people that they can vote by email or text. As far as what's going on in social media, I mean, that's like, trying to grab water, right? I mean, there's stuff going on all the time. That's why we're having this discussion today, to ensure that everybody knows, hey, these are the appropriate locations to go to get accurate information.
As of Monday, October 5th, Pima County had more than 620,000 people who are registered to vote, an all-time record, and the number will get higher. A federal judge in Phoenix agreed to extend the registration deadline until Friday, October 23rd, giving residents nearly 3 additional weeks. Friday, October 23rd is also the last day to request a ballot by mail. Those should be completed and returned by mail at least 1 week before the election, or for extra security, they can be dropped off in person at one of your county's designated early voting sites. For additional peace of mind, you can also track your ballot online.
When you dropped it off at a polling location or at the post office, when we received it, when we signature checked it, when we did for tabulation. So you can follow it so that you rest assured that your ballot was in our possession. So that's what we're doing for people, is educating them more out there.
That's all for now. Thanks so much for joining us. To get in touch, visit us on social media or send an email to Arizona360@azpm.org and let us know what you think. We'll see you next week.